Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. It's our Monday, February 11th, 2019 meeting. Would all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And at this point in time, I'd like to introduce the members of the commission that are here this evening. To my far right is Commission Member Jeff Cohan. Next to me is Commission Member James Fitzsimmons. To my far left is Rocco Matarazzo, who is the Secretary of the Commission. To my immediate left is J.P. Benoit, who is the Vice Chairperson of the Commission. To the staff table at the lower level to my left is Cynthia Kleist, who is our Recording Secretary. And next to Cynthia is Casey Hand, who is our town planner. I'm Jim Seichter, the chairperson of the commission. Our next order of business is to approve the minutes of our January 14th, 2019 meeting. Do we have any commission members that would like to make any corrections to the minutes before I ask for a motion?
Mr. Chairman, on page 13, there was a error which talks about the vote for the application for 6 Research Parkway. My vote was a yes to deny, not a no to deny. Other than that, I have no other revisions.
Anyone else with any comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the minutes as amended.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Cohan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstention.
And Mr. Bennett abstains. Which brings us to our next order of business. Well, before I get to the various items that are going to be heard this evening, there's 2 items that will not be heard this evening. So if there's any members of the public that are here this evening, just be aware that they will not be heard. The first item that will not be heard is a public hearing, item number 2 on our agenda. It's a special permit, traffic generation for a hotel for Patel Shield Hotels at 1175 Barnes Road. Again, there's no action on that this evening. The next item is number 5, which is a new business item on our agenda, which is a site plan for vehicle storage for 6 Research LLC at 6 Research Parkway. Again, that item will not be heard this evening. Which brings us to the first item on our agenda that will be heard, which is item number 1. It's a public hearing. It's a special permit, governor facility use material storage for the town of Wallingford, the electric division at 228 East Street. And if the applicant would please come forward to begin preparing for the presentation. And Mr. Matarazzo, if you please read the legal notice as well as note all correspondence for the record.
Mr. Chairman, we have a legal notice regarding special permit number 401-19, special permit traffic generation for Patel Shield Hotels to construct a 63,000.
Matarazzo, item number 1, which is the special permit for the town of Wallingford electric division.
Legal.
Sorry about that. I had it crossed off right, but I was reading from the wrong one. Special permit number 402-19, special permit government facility use for town of Wallingford electric division to create additional storage for the existing facility at 100 John Street on the adjacent parcel at 228 East Street. We have some correspondence dated January 25th, 2019 to Anthony Buccieri. Is that correct? Buccieri, sorry. Signed by Casey Hand. We have interdepartmental referral regarding application 40219-19 dated January 8th, 2019, signed by the environmental planner. An interdepartmental referral regarding application 402-19 dated January 8th, 2019, signed by the fire marshal. A memorandum to Planning and Zoning Commission from Casey Hand dated February 1st, 2019.
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Matarazzo. If the applicant and or his representative please introduce themselves and begin their presentation.
Richard Hendershot, Director of Public Utilities.
Tony Bucari, General Manager, Wallingford Electric. All right, I'm going to just read a document that was prepared that kind of goes through the background, the details of use, and then the planned modifications for the site. So on October 10th, 2012, the town of Wallingford received title to the property located at 228 East Street through a foreclosure process. This property has a 52.04-foot contiguous property line with the town-owned property addressed at 51 John Street. The rear property line of 51 John Street is common with the side property line of 228 East Street. The Town of Wallingford Electric Division is making the application to the Planning and Zoning Commission to expand into this property to allow additional storage of material. Currently, this property is in an R6 residential zone. The details of use on the property at 228 East Street is approximately 5,441 square foot property bounded by East Street on the front of the property, 55 and 58 Park Street on the side of the property, 54 Park Street, the rear of the property, and 51 John Street on the side of the property. Intended use for this property is additional storage of electric utility equipment. The plan is to store slow-moving inventory. The type of inventory is typically new construction items that would be accessed or needed during normal business hours, which are Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. To 3:30 p.m. Examples are decorative light poles used in the center of town, aluminum parking lot poles, fiberglass junction boxes, and specialty pole-top hardware. The plans and modifications, the 228 East Street property, although owned by the town of Wallingford, is currently being utilized by personal property owned by the tenants living at 56 and 58 Park Street. There is currently a wooded stockade fence at the rear of the property installed by the owner of 54 Park Street. The Electric Division has developed plans to install an 8-foot high fence around the property. The plans are structured in such a way that the fence on the north side of the property, contiguous property line with 56 and 58 Park Street, will be located 3 feet back from the property line. There'll be a natural screening plants, arborvitae or similar, planted in the electric side of the fence. There'll also be an 8-foot fence along the John Street, the front of the property, which will be set back 10 feet back from the property line. This will put the fence 22 feet from the East Street curb. Natural plantings will be planted on the East Street side of the fence to optimize screening, but spaced in a manner that allows employees and police to monitor unauthorized access to this area. And then 4 or 5 street trees will be planted along East Street as directed by the town tree warden. Chain link fence will be installed along the back of the property line adjacent to the rear stockade fence and will be constructed to include vinyl screening. The fence will integrate into the existing fence that currently surrounds the 51 John Street property. This will be there will be a 16-foot sliding gate installed in the fence at the rear of the John Street property to facilitate access into the area. And then grass and loam surface will be replaced with 3/4-inch crushed stone to allow a stable surface for material storage and access with Wallingford electric vehicles. There's currently no lighting proposed for this area. That's it.
Thank you. Is that the extent of your presentation?
That's it. Yes.
Thank you. Casey, before I go to the commission members for comments, as far as your comments, I know you had some, as far as those being addressed, you please...
Yep. Yeah, the electric division did a wonderful job of meeting with me and we coming up with screening to ensure that it's appropriate for the area. That's the subject property is in a residential zone. The primary electric division property is in an I zone, so there's a zoning line down there, but they agreed to move the fence back far enough so they're going to have their full required 10-foot front yard, and they're putting a lot of trees in there, and then they've agreed to put some trees, some street trees in as well so that there's some protection and there's also appropriate screening. So we're very comfortable with that, and they worked very... I really appreciate the cooperation from the division. And the other comment that I will make is there are some items on the property that I don't believe belong to the electric division that I believe will be removed. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, I think that's encroachment
they'd want
from
it removed.
from an adjacent property, yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Hand. Commission members with questions for the applicant. Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really just have a procedural question, and it has to do with the acquisition of the property. You know, apparently it was a foreclosure. In, you know, other instances of the town acquiring, you know, purchasing land, we've had to, you know, have the town council approve it, and then we have to, you know, give our okay to purchase that. Is that something we have to do with this application, or is this being handled differently?
I think that was done as part, I think there were like 3 foreclosures that were done at once a while ago. I'd have to double check for you.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other commission members? Yeah, I have just one question. When I was looking at the plan where it shows the, you know, the plantings that's being proposed just on this plan, it seems, you know, that you're putting one of the trees, you're putting on, you know, someone else's property. Is that correct, or? I'm not sure if they granted you permission to do it or not, but.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we would put one on somebody else, but I do see that. I don't know that we would do that.
So, yeah, so I mean, so at the end of the day, most likely that would be, just would be removed and not part of the screening that you're, or the planning that you're proposing.
Correct.
Okay, good. Thank you. This is a public hearing. Are there any members from the public who would like to comment on the application? If there are, please come forward, state your name and address, and what your comments may be. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the applicant. If you'd like to make any final comments, you're certainly not obligated to. Casey, rather, Mrs. Hand, you have no further comments? And seeing no further comments from commission members, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we close the public hearing for application 402-19.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions? And at this point in time, I entertain a motion on the application.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve application 402-19, special permit government facility use for the town of Wallingford Electric to allow facility storage at 228 East Street as discussed on the record tonight and as shown on plans and information submitted in application packet dated January 8, 2019, subject to the approval of the town to select and install all shrubs and trees. Casey, any other conditions? That's it.
We have a motion on the application. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. Voting beginning with Mr. Cohan, please.
Yes.
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 And yes, application's been approved. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This brings us to our next item. We're going to jump up on the agenda and go to old business, which is item number 6, which is a site plan of approximately 5,000 square feet water pollution control facility for the town of Wallingford Sewer Division at 155 John Street. And again, Mr. Matarazzo, if you would please note all items for the, all correspondence for the record, please. And that's item number 6.
Mr. Chairman, we have a memo to Planning and Zoning Commission from Department of Engineering dated January 11th, 2019. We have correspondence dated February 6, 2019. It was just a collection of correspondence regarding the site application 223-18 from Casey Hand, town planner. The correspondence dated December 17th, 2018. Correspondence regarding site plan application 223-18.
Thank you.
A memorandum to Casey Hand Town Planner from Aaron O'Hare, Environmental Planner, dated December 10th, 2018. And I believe that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Matarazzo. If the applicant and/or his representative, please introduce themselves and begin their presentation.
Good evening, I'm Neil Amick, General Manager for the Town of Wallingford Water and Sewer Divisions. To my left is Dennis Setsko with AECom, who is the design engineer, and further to my left, excuse me, is Maureen Crowley, also with AECom. So, in December, we gave you a kind of a first look of our application. The Wallingford Sewer Division and AECom are currently designing upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant that are needed to meet new phosphorus discharge requirements that come online April 1, 2022. The existing wastewater treatment plant was constructed circa 1987 to 1989, and since that time there have been no significant upgrades other than one hybrid nitrogen treatment process in 2005. So the purpose of the upgrades are to meet the new phosphorus discharge effluent limitations, as well as ensure the wastewater treatment plant can treat both the flow and the loadings for the future 20 years. So with that, I'll really turn it over to Dennis and Maureen to go through a brief presentation.
Thanks, Neil. As Neil as Neil mentioned, the project has been gone through some effort at this point in time. From a planning and zoning perspective, we had a pre-application meeting back in October 25, 2018, and we submitted November 8th. We were here, if you remember, on December 10th to make a preliminary application, and since that time we've been responding to comments from the town. So I'll make a brief presentation. We'll open it up for questions after that. Initially, first, we did want to show where the project lies within the town. It's in an industrial area, and as you can see, it's located tucked at the back end of John Street here, North Arrow here, the Quinnipiac River right here, and John Street going out to South Colony Road right here is where the project is. It's quite well hidden. From a planning and zoning perspective, it's in an I-40 zone. The actual site is 153 acres. It covers all of this area in through here, so it's quite a bit. The treatment plant itself is in this green area here, so it takes up only a small portion of the total site. From a setback perspective, this is the frontage. There's the 50-foot buffer. We're well within that. But interestingly, on the side, there is a property line right here that belongs to the electric company, and that treatment process has been there since 1988. We're not affecting that in any way. None of our work involves that piece of the project. It's just an existing situation that's there right now. And I'll show you on the next couple of slides that we are not anywhere near that, that property line. The current process at the treatment plant, I'll just quickly go through the buildings that we have there. The flow comes in through the screening and degridding area, through primary settling, over to this pump station, pumped up to the anoxic tank, to the RBCs, settling, UV post-aeration, and it goes out. Solids are handled over here. The new process for the phosphorus removal, plus some upgrades along the way, will include an anaerobic tank over here, and if you remember that discussion about the side property line runs like right along here, so we're not anywhere near that. We'll be building new secondary settling tanks, a pumping station to pump the flow up to here through UV disinfection and out over here. The reason for building this here when we have it here is because this will flood on occasion and we'll get no disinfection, so that had to be taken care of in this upgrade. So the new process will consist of some emergency power, a new power supply in here, plus a number of structures that are needed for the phosphorus process. Erosion and sediment controls, the specifications that come with this project identify, as do the drawings, the erosion and sediment controls that are required for the project. Protection around the catch basins, silt fencing, and other barriers along the wetland areas in through here. And as the site construction moves on and other things get built, these are maintained all through construction, and if additional sedimentation and erosion controls are needed, they'll be added as needed. We show 2 tracking pads in here at this point for vehicles leaving the facility. Storage of materials and vehicle flow during construction. As I mentioned, we're at the back end of John Street here. This is a dead end at this point right here. So traffic flow will come in, construction traffic comes in, and they'll be able to access the entire site via that way, and then out to South Colony Road as well. Stockpile of materials, meaning it could be any kind of materials, really includes the site itself where there's access to store materials. But in addition, there's some space available here for trailers, materials, and actually over here as well, which is now being used as a pipe storage area now that we would use for storage of equipment that we would need on the project site or materials. Grading and paving, because we will be doing installing some additional buildings and structures. There's a lot of mechanical equipment in there. We're going to need site access for vehicles both during construction and after. So there'll be some additional repaving in some of these areas here and new paving over here because the grading has changed a little bit. And we also need access to these new structures here as well. So there'll be some additional paving that's added. Storm drainage is very minor. Actually, I'm going to go back one. Just give me a minute here. There's storm drainage throughout the site right now. The only part of the storm drainage we're touching right now is in this area, and it's because we're building this pump station right here. The storm drainage runs right through it. So we're actually going to go around it, which I show on this slide right here. We're just going to go around the building, put in a hydrodynamic separator here, and all the flow, as it does right now, goes out to the Quinnipiac River. It'll be the same in the future as well. Some of the existing site structures, as you can see, is a lot of treatment processes here. It's concrete and aluminum, stainless steel. The structures are flat roof, brick and block construction, concrete. The new structures will be the same. There'll be a lot of similarities. These are industrial buildings and they're functional, but there'll be brick and block structure to match what's there right now. There'll be aluminum doors and, like I say in this case here, a loading dock. This is just one of the buildings, but all of them are pretty much the same brick and block kind of construction. And that ends the brief presentation. So we'll entertain any questions you have now.
Thank you, sir. We have commission members with any questions for the applicant. Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just a couple of questions. Approximately, how long will the construction, process take once you get started?
It's probably in the 30-month range.
I'm sorry?
30 months.
30 months, okay. You mentioned the very sporadic flooding of, the treatment plant that happens. If that flooding occurs when, the new processes in place. Just a couple of questions, I guess. Are you designing it so that, the flooding will be minimized? And, if not, what will happen if there is a flood with, the new process?
Well, there's a couple answers to that question. First
Right.
of all, the flood zone isn't being changed with what we're doing here, so that is not changed. But as far as the processes go, the new treatment processes are designed for the 100-year flood plus 3 feet. So in addition to the 100-year flood elevation, we are 3 feet above that as a minimum. And most of the structures that we're designing are higher than that.
Okay.
Excuse me, before you get started, would you mind turning that off, please? It's somewhat blinding me.
Oh, sure.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Cohen.
Oh, no, that's quite all right.
Thank you.
The other question I had was, during the construction phase, is there any possibility that the current function could get, somehow interrupted? And, basically, what's going to happen on the day that you turn this on? Is it, phased in, or is it, you turn the key one day when you're done and, the whole operation starts? And, the important question is, could there be any problems in the existing operation until you get this completed?
Well, we've taken that all into account, as you may imagine.
Yeah.
If you noticed, a lot of the structures are built in areas that are not treatment processes at this point in time. So the existing treatment process will just continue to operate while we build all the new structures, and then there'll be I would say it's not going to be a day, it's going to be a series of days where a transition will be made from the old process to the new. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of testing out that has to happen to make sure everything is working right before that transition is made. In some cases, you can make the transition quickly. We don't see that happening here. It'll probably take a few days, but not that long. But it's all been taken into account with power, emergency power. Everything has all been phased in. So we do a lot of this, and this is there's bypass pumping arrangements and things like that we have there. But so the existing plant runs until one fine day we make a switch over, and then we run through the new process. And then there's some other work that will be done after that. But it's all been phased in. It's all been thought through.
Okay, so basically what I'm hearing is, when you start to activate it, is it going to be a fix and go type situation, or would you possibly fall back at some point? Sounds like a fix and go.
We could if we needed
Okay.
to, but there's going to be so much testing out prior to that. We'll make sure all the pumps operate, all the information's getting back to the computer systems, everything is all in place. There's a whole lot of checkout and testing before that, so I don't really envision any issues. But surprisingly, and this is a bit unusual, we could go back to the old process for a short term if need be, but that's not the plan.
Sounds good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Other commission members? Ms. Fitzsimmons?
Thank you. Just to follow up on a question from Mr. Cohen, I want to make sure I understood. On slide 6 is when I made the note, you talked about flooding, and I made a note, and of course I'm familiar with the site. This probably is a question for the town. When was the last time the site flooded? Do you recall?
Well, I think when we say flooding is the Quinnipiac River floods back up the effluent channel into the UV disinfection tank. So it's not necessarily precipitation flooding, overland flow. What we talk about is the Quinnipiac River during high flows backs into the UV short circuits.
Okay.
And then we're actually using currently, maybe once or twice a year, hair dryers in order to dry out the circuitry.
Really?
The UV is original to the plant, 1989.
Okay.
So yeah, so flooding, when we say flooding, we're really backwards up the pipe.
But it
Okay.
doesn't overflow the structure.
Okay. I when you mentioned it, I made a note because I'm thinking I was out at the site and I'm thinking I wouldn't think of that, but yeah, knowing what's behind there. So, and I guess it's just I couldn't think of a better place in town for something like this. So I will address the issue of landscaping. I do not feel any additional landscaping is necessary around what we all know this to be. I mean, and you're down that road for a reason. So I would be in favor of waiving the site plan requirements for the required landscaping. And then I read it, and I read something in the paper about this. The requirements, are they state requirements or federal requirements that this has to be done?
They're federal requirements driven down to the state.
It started in Washington.
Yeah,
Okay.
these are national requirements, but
Yep.
the state itself has its own requirements. There's some federal money that goes along with it as well, but these are actually driven by the feds.
If you could
can't
please
hear you.
just pull the microphone a little bit closer to you, if you would, please, sir. Thank you.
So it's federal requirements passed down by the state.
They're passed down to the state level.
Yeah.
It's all wastewater treatment. That's why you can see some places have low phosphorus numbers, some places have higher numbers. It really depends on what the rivers you discharge to and things like that. It's federal stuff, but it's pushed down to the state level.
Okay. And then I noticed in your documentation that was given to us, I guess, in November, in order to comply with the funding deadline requirements, the project is expected to begin in July of 19. That's unchanged, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
And 50% grant funding, is it grant funding? This is nosy, not zoning. Is it state or federal money that the town will get?
It's both.
Nice, okay. And then, similar to Mr. Cohen, the 30-month is your best case projection, 2.5 years to complete this process, right?
Correct.
Okay. Would it start any sooner than July?
I don't see that happening.
Okay, okay. Yeah, then, Mr. Chairman, through you, I guess the only thing I would say is, it's an unusual site, but because it goes to a dead end, because of what else is happening there, lighting, I think, is another issue that we wanted to talk about, but I definitely would not be in favor of any additional landscaping requirements for this.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimmons. Other commission members?
Sorry. I did have one zoning matter. You made reference to, during the presentation, about the electric division property versus your property. Through the town planner, isn't it all the town property? Or is there, because it's Wallingford Electric, not to delay this 1 second, but is this a chance to correct it and address it, or do we let it go and just acknowledge it on the maps?
We've sort of had that discussion. I think that someone from the design team, Ms. Crowley, pointed out today, the one benefit is we have an exemption for utility structures. So if they're 8 feet or less, they're exempt from setbacks. That being said, we have raised the issue with that. I think it's being, Mr. Amway can address this maybe a little further, but in general, we have a tendency when, there are multiple town-owned properties to kind of treat them all like one property, but we really need to kind of decide and figure out kind of where our property lines, because if they are remaining separate properties, that could come into play in the future.
Right.
So I think that is that's an existing condition. There's nothing to be done about it. It doesn't impact their proposal today, but we are working with the town attorney, or we've brought it up with the town attorney, and I think moving forward, we're gonna work to identify the actual property lines. So, because that's come up with utility properties in the past too.
Again, through you, Mr. Chairman, just to make sure I'm clear, so the electric division and water company are both part of the public utilities.
Yes, but
Is
these are,
is the property owned by the town in both cases?
it's owned by separate entities of the
town.
I
Okay.
believe.
Yeah, and
So,
again,
is that, although I think with the electric parcel, there is a little bit more of a question because there is
Right.
that private lease issue.
right.
So that's all been raised. But they are all we believe they're all town-owned parcels, but they're separate entities of the town.
All right.
Is that an accurate representation?
Our research has that both are just simply listed as Town of Wallingford.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimmons. Other commission members? I had just a few items that I think Casey, or rather Mrs. Hand, still needs to be, I think, provided, which is an S&E plan, is that correct?
Yep, so we do have them, as they presented, there was a sedimentation and erosion control plan, but what I've asked for you is to make as a condition of approval, that I get an opportunity to approve the final sedimentation and erosion control plan. I'd asked them to make a couple tweaks, which they did, but didn't make it into this set of plans.
And as far as the lighting plans?
Same
That's
thing
the
with
same
the
thing,
lighting
would be the
plans,
same
yeah,
thing?
just to be if you're comfortable with it, to let me sign off on it as a condition of approval.
And then just the final thing, just to kind of echo to agree with Mr. Fitzsimmons was saying concerning the landscaping. Again, like Mr. Fitzsimmons, and I suspect most of us went down there and looked to see where the property was. And as far as putting landscaping in, I'm not quite sure what the benefit of that would be. So I'd certainly be in favor of essentially not requiring or waiving the landscaping requirements there.
Yeah, the benefit or the sort of fortunate circumstance in this case is that it's, and I sort of made them do some extra work to identify where the actual property lines were. That part of John Street is a right-of-way, so there is no property line there, so there's no real applicable landscaping
To put in.
requirement anyhow, so it kind of all works out.
Okay, thank you. Again, this is, it's not a public hearing, but we do allow members of the public to comment on an application. Any members of the public that would like to comment on the application, please come forward, state your name and address and your comments. Seeing none, again, I just bring it back to the applicant if they'd like to make any final comments. Again, you're not compelled to.
None at this time, thank you.
Good, okay. And again, Casey, rather Mrs. Hand, before I ask for a motion on the application, again, your comments as far as the completeness of the application and any items that may be outstanding other than the ones that we've discussed, which I believe we'd be willing to give you authority over.
Thank you. Yes, no, as you saw in the packets, I had some pretty extensive comments, and they did a lot of work to address all of those comments. So I'm satisfied, other than what you mentioned as conditions.
Good. Okay, seeing that there's no other comments from commission members at this point in time, I entertain a motion on the application. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, one question for Casey is, we also have the condition of approval for the environmental planner in this, right? It was dated December 10th, 2018.
Yes, and I believe so that is that's essentially a, let me just see. That's a condition of, that's a report on the condition of approval from the Inland Wetlands Commission, so you don't have to include, you don't have to include that because Inland Wetlands made it a condition, but you could reference it if you're comfortable with that.
Okay, all right, perfect.
And again, I'd entertain a motion on the application.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve application 223-18, site plan for Town of Wallingford Sewer Division to construct various structures and buildings associated with phosphorus reduction project at the Water Pollution Control Facility at 155 John Street, as shown on plans entitled Town of Wallingford, Connecticut Water Pollution Control Facility Upgrades, contract number 18-089, CWF-721, site plan approval documents dated to February 6, 2019, subject to abiding to correspondence of the condition of approval for environmental planner dated December 10, 2018, site plan requirement for landscaping to be waived, S&E plan to be approved by town planner, and lighting plan to be approved by town planner.
Thank you, Mr. Benoit. We have a motion on the application. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons, voting beginning with Mr. Cohan, please.
Yes.
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 And yes, application's been approved. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, it brings us to it, and seeing how we moved item number 6 up and skipped over item number 4, new business, we'll take the next item being the new business item, item number 4, which is a site plan addition to manufacturing warehouse office building for Roland Technologies, Inc. at 320 and 340 Barnes Road. Again, if the applicant and/or his representative would please come forward to begin preparing for the presentation. And Mr. Matarazzo, if you would please read all correspondence relating to item number 4.
Mr. Chairman, we have correspondence dated January 23rd, 2019, from Casey Hand to Dennis Genevieve. We have correspondence dated January 31st, 2019 to Roland Technologies regarding site plan application 201-19. We have interoffice memorandum to Casey Hand Town Planner from Eric Kruger, Senior Engineer, dated February 1st, 2019. We have interdepartmental referral regarding application 201-19 dated January 11th, 2019. Signed Department of Health. We have interdepartmental referral regarding application 201-19 dated January 11th, 2019, signed by the environmental planner. Have some correspondence from regarding Roland Technologies total vehicle counts and post expansion. We have interdepartmental referral regarding application 201-19 dated January 11th, 2019, signed by the fire marshal. And we have a set of drawings dated February 8th, 2019. And we have correspondence dated February 8th, 2019, regarding Connecticut Consulting Engineers. Signature. That would be it.
Thank you, Mr. Matarazzo. If the applicant would please introduce himself and begin the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For your record, my name is Dennis Genevieve. I'm an attorney with the Genevieve Law Firm. I represent the owner and applicant Roland Technologies. To my left is John Gable. John is our engineer with Connecticut Consulting Engineers. To my right is Robert Day. Robert is the architect involved in the project. And in the audience is Mike Iovine, the Vice President of Roland Technologies, here to answer any operational questions you might have as part of our presentation this evening. By way of background, Mr. Chairman, we did make a short presentation to the Wetlands Commission, and we received their approval at the last meeting. We made a presentation to the Zoning Board of Appeals. That was also approved. We have reduced, they granted our request to reduce the number of parking spaces based upon the anticipated usage, so that there is, the plan that's before you is properly before you. 320 Barnes Road is a 8.4 acre parcel of land. It's located in the IX zone. It is currently developed with about 70,000 square feet of building area and 101 parking spaces. This site has been before the Planning and Zoning Commissions on a couple of occasions in the past, 2015 being the most recent. It houses the operation of Roland Technologies, and the anticipation or the hope of this application is to expand that existing location. In order to accomplish that, Roland Technologies has entered into a contract to purchase 340 Barnes Road. And when John goes up to the easel, he'll show you that. It's, of course, in the maps you have in front of you. 340 Barnes Road is a 1.1 acre parcel of land. It abuts 320 Barnes Road to the east. It is also located in the IX zone. It is developed currently with a single-family residential property. Again, in this IX zone, it is a legal non-conforming use. It will be raised with your approval and become part of the overall project for Roland Technologies. Now, the applicant proposes to expand its building and business here in Wallingford. Again, previous expansions were approved in 2013 and 2015. The applicant proposes in this plan, Mr. Chairman, to add 34,000 square feet of building and relocate the majority of the parking spaces to the 340 Barnes Road parcel, a total of 125 spaces. Again, we've received approval from the ZBA to reduce the parking count from the required 161 under your regulations to 125. And we also received a lot coverage variance because of some architectural features that Mr. Day will talk about in his presentation. One of the things that we made clear, and I'm sure you'll note that from the comments from Mrs. Hand, we had asked, and that's one of the reasons we went to the ZBA, was to keep these two parcels separate and distinct for a period of time instead of merging them. 320 Barnes Road is an establishment under Connecticut's Transfer Act. So it's going through a process with Connecticut DEEP, and that takes a period of time. It's already been through that process for several years. It probably has several years more to go. And so what we didn't want to do, and Mrs. Hand I understood well, is to merge those two until that process is completed. And that's one of the reasons in our presentation to the Zoning Board of Appeals, we made it clear to them that it is our intent, our desire to merge the two, just a question of timing. That would happen as soon as we receive the final closure on the establishment processing of 320 Barnes. So you'll note in some of the staff comments, Casey's noted that there should be, the cross easement for 340 and 320, and again, we're happy to accept that as a condition should you see fit to grant it. John is here to talk to you about how we're addressing the stormwater. There's a new driveway that's being proposed and parking. So with that, John, please continue the presentation.
Good evening. John Gable with Connecticut Consulting Engineers. As Dennis pointed out, our proposals consisted of this addition here located to the west of the site. We have to modify the existing parking lot to accommodate the new parking area here south of the addition. Also, we, as Dennis stated, the existing home at 340 Barnes Road is being demolished and raised, and we're going to be adding all this new parking area for this addition. There's going to be two entrances, one to the east and the new aisle to the west. That's going to service the rear portion and also these two parking areas. We did provide drainage for the new parking areas and the roof runoff for the addition. It's going to be discharged to the wetland to the west or the east, and there's a discharge point that goes to the city system to the west. There was no treatment for the system going to the west, which we are now providing treatment for that drainage system. Also, we did provide landscaping requirements for the new parking area here and also here. You've seen our calculations, we exceed the landscaping requirements, and also we have to provide street trees along the frontage, and also the interior trees for here, which we have added. I do want to make one point though. As this part here where the wetland is, there's about 5 trees that we have to provide, which we distribute over here because of the wetland issue. We'd like to, I have some pictures I want to pass to the commission. Just a couple minutes. Pass them down, please.
All set.
If you look, the pictures from the beginning, they start from the existing driveway here, and it runs to the east. And what it depicts is the existing trees that are currently there, and we were hoping to, instead of proposing the new trees, we'd like to get a credit for the ones that are existing there. And to see if you guys agree with that. That's pretty much, we also, yeah, I think that was pretty much it for the landscaping.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, one of the things that I'm sure you all have seen as you've driven by the location, 340 Barnes, again, a very attractive single-family house, again, is being raised. And you'll note that there's a fence currently between the existing driveway for 320 for Roland Technologies and the house. That, of course, will come down. And it sits at a higher grade, so they'll be grading to improve the sight lines, the sight distances of the driveways. I think that was important. You'll note, I know that's one of the comments in Mrs. Hannon in her comments today, and certainly I believe the town engineer has not yet offered a written opinion on that, from what I understand, but we would accept that as a condition. We're comfortable that we've improved dramatically the sight distances for that location. With that, I'd like to send Bob Day up to the easel to tell you a little bit about the building itself and what's being proposed there.
This driveway right here as far as sight lines, because engineering that way, we don't have an issue with it. And then looking at engineering, Rob was concerned about the sight lines on this driveway. So we can talk to him, I'll ask you.
Good evening. I'm Bob Day with Robert Day Architects, and I've got a couple additional images existing of the building. Running out of easel space here. I'll put it right here. And then I also have just some color to what John had done in his engineering drawing. I'm going to lay this right here on the floor. This diagram just kind of gives a synopsis of kind of where they are now and where we're going with the proposed addition. So the existing building, nearly 70,000 square feet, is composed of three kind of use components. On the far west side is is just a little over 10,000 square feet of office administration offices space. B is largely the warehouse area, a little over 29,000 square feet. And C, including the most recent addition, is the manufacturing area. So this shows then the existing building in gray, and this then is our proposed addition coming out. And then this is the breakdown of it. So we're proposing to add just under 34,000 square feet total area, all on one level, at the same existing floor level of the building. And as part of the addition, we'll then be making some internal modifications to the allocation of spaces to best serve their kind of operation model going forward. Manufacturing will largely stay in the existing area. The warehouse in the center will expand into this kind of broader section in the middle. And the office will slide forward from this back kind of what is really a rear position of the building to this forward piece coming out to the corner of the property, near the corner of the property. And then the old office space will then be converted to manufacturing support spaces. The architecture of the building is kind of classic Connecticut industrial park architecture with brick fins, kind of standard storefront glass, and broad, deep overhangs. The last diagram shows kind of that overhang line for the eave and how we would pick up on that and continue with that around the building. We, as part of the ZBA approval, we got that footprint of the overhang outside the building envelope exempt from counting as finished floor space. But the addition and the proposed addition lines all conform to the setbacks, so we're not violating any setbacks. So even though we're exempted from that overhang as being finished floor area, the new exterior surface of that, exterior edge of that, the new overhang, proposed overhang, would all fall within the existing setback requirements. The elevation drawings are the design intent of what we're doing, where you've got the existing facade of the office wing that faces out on the side road, And then this shows the extension and how we're going to take basically the same vertical lines and extend them out to the corner. And then it shows this is the facade that faces onto Barnes Road. So this is the warehouse front and then the end of the office building. So one issue that they have now is the parking is located on the southern side of the site, but the office wing, which is on the west side of the building, the entrance is actually in the middle western section. So visitors who pull up in the parking lot have about a 250-foot walk to the front door and uncovered and everything else. So one thing this is also addressing by bringing this office wing out to the corner now, we're now having kind of a direct proper front corporate entrance right on that lower front parking area. Architecturally, we're planning to build upon the existing finishes of the building. The warehouse right now and the manufacturing portion of the building is a very handsome kind of standard metal siding on a brick base, and we're planning on working with that, and something very similar in the office wing as well.
If you would just mind putting that one drawing of the finished plan up on the easel, just because some people that are here this evening, and then also someone who may be watching this on television, so they have an idea. And again, if you could just a quick summation of it, if you would,
so
please.
the gray footprint, which is kind of like a C shape, is the existing manufacturing warehouse and office space. The kind of interior of the area. So right now the driveway enters approximately here, and there's 2 rows of double-loaded parking in front of the building in this location. The driveway will, with this addition, and then the interior surface area where the loading docks are in the center here. There is some employee parking in the center area, but this is kind of like the daily exterior activity of the comings and goings of the operation of the building, of the business on the interior. So the gray footprint is existing, and then the tan footprint is the proposed addition.
Good. Thank you.
I think the only other point, I think, was made by Mr. Gable, Mr. Chairman, is the fact that as far as the stormwater management, we've proposed certain improvements so that the stormwater, which is not treated currently even before it enters into the town system, will be treated. The roof water is properly being addressed and directed towards the wetlands. So we think we've tried to comply with everything the town staff thought important. You do note that there was a list of comments from Mrs. Hand that was delivered to us back in the end of January. She was kind enough to provide me with a copy of her notes for today's meeting, and I think you see that we've addressed the vast majority of them, and hopefully we're ready to move forward if this commission is.
Good enough. Thank you. And again, before I go to the commission, Mrs. Hand, would you like to comment on your comments and how they've been addressed by the applicant, and if there are any outstanding issues that still would need to be addressed? I know that would like you to comment on that, on the new driveway that's being created for the parking lot and sight lines. And while we don't have anything, I don't believe we have anything from our town engineer, I know that you have spoken with him and indicated initially what his concerns are, and then how those may or may not be addressed.
Yep, sure. So yes, I had, again, a pretty lengthy set of comments, and Mr. Gable and Connecticut Consulting Engineers did a really thorough job of addressing those between when they got them and when they submitted their revised comments. So the majority of my comments have been addressed. The issue with the driveway, you'll see, so there are 1 mild sort of minor relocation of a driveway, and then a new driveway further to the east. So that's the one furthest away from the intersection there. And Mr. Baltramitis had, as discussed, expressed some concern about verifying that the sight lines there would work. And the applicant's consultant did bring in the sight line information last week, but I know Mr. Baltramitis hasn't had a chance to fully review that yet. They were comfortable, and it appears that the sightlines do work. But what we discussed, and I did discuss this with Mr. Baltramitis as well, and he was comfortable with it, is a condition that he would be able to, that basically he would need to verify and approve those sightlines as presented, and if there were any issues with them, that driveway will just be removed. So I don't anticipate that will be a problem, but they have agreed to that as a condition, so that we can move forward with this. And again, they are bringing the slope down, as Mr. Senaviva discussed, so that should improve the sight distance from there, but if there were any issues, then they would just operate with the one driveway. The other conditions that I've asked you for are, one, again, they addressed 95% of my landscaping comments, but there was one tweak I want them to make in terms of number of interior trees that I haven't had an opportunity to discuss with them yet, so again, I'd like the opportunity to have the final landscaping plan be approved. And as Mr. Gable discussed, within the wetland area, there are several trees that are well over your required 2-inch caliper. So if you're comfortable with that, the regulations do allow you to allow existing trees to address the requirement in that area. So I just want to know that you're comfortable with that, or if you're comfortable with that. And that would prevent them from also having to disturb that wetland area. And then finally, again, final opportunity to review, for me to sign off on their lighting plan. A lot of times the lighting plans kind of don't get addressed till the very end, so that's pretty straightforward. Obviously, they'll have to comply with your full cutoff fixture requirements, maximum height requirements. And finally, just to circle back to the issue with the two separate properties. You saw in my comments to the applicant, as Attorney Senaviva mentioned, my sort of recommendation. So it works out nicely in the sense that the building itself, the addition itself still complies with all of the setbacks for the current property lines, and the majority of the other requirements. The coverage variance has been addressed already, but I would look for, basically you could just make comment number 1 in my letter a condition, and that will essentially state that if and when the restrictions to the larger property are removed, the properties would be merged, and also basically states that this parking is to be affiliated with the proposed addition. It's worked out nicely that, because this is, as Attorney Senaviva said, I think the second or third edition we've approved in the last 5 to 10 years for Roland. So it's worked out nicely that they were able to acquire this other piece to allow them to do this. And this sort of rounds out the property and kind of puts them at their maximum use of the property. So all of my other comments have been addressed.
Good. Not to muddy the waters, but on that east driveway, if in fact the sight lines were not adequate, you mentioned that that driveway would be eliminated.
Yeah.
Would be just the possibility of just making it one way, just one way in, or would that just not be practical?
That,
And that's if that might be an option for the applicant. I'm not sure if
yeah.
you may not feel about it.
Yeah, that actually is a good suggestion, I think. So we could make it a one-way in, and that's something.
Provided the
again,
sight lines are not adequate.
Yep, absolutely. We could do that, and that way at least people parking versus the trucks could get in. Yep.
It eliminates a little bit of conflict.
Yeah.
Okay. Commission members for questions for the applicant. Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really don't have any questions, just a couple of comments. I think it's a pretty good plan, and glad to see you're expanding in Wallingford, and hopefully we can accommodate that. And yes, I am willing to give you credit for those trees. Thank you.
Any other commission members?
I would agree with the trees.
No other commission members have any questions? Again, any members of the public that would like to come and make any comments on the application, please come forward and name and address. Seeing none, certainly I'd just like to make a few comments. I certainly agree with Mr. Cohan. I'd certainly like to thank the applicant for, deciding to expand here in Wallingford. I know the commission appreciates, and I'm sure all the members of the public appreciate it. And as far as the trees, I think we're all unanimous as far as giving credit on the trees. So if there's no more comments from any commission members, I would entertain a motion on the application.
Just recommended conditions from other departments, Health Department, Water and Sewer, and Fire Marshal, and final S&E bond to be determined upon submittal of final plans.
Mr. Benoit.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve application 201-19 site plan for Roland Technology, Inc. to construct a 33,737 gross square foot addition to the manufacturing warehouse office building at 320 Barnes Road and construct association required parking on the associated parcel of 340 Barnes Road as shown on plans entitled Prepared for Roland Technologies, Inc., 320 Barnes Road, Wallingford, Connecticut, dated December 31st, 2018, revised to February 7th, 2019, prepared by the Connecticut Consulting Engineers, LLC, subject to approved by town engineer of sightlines on east driveway. Review and approve landscaping plan by the town planner. Review and approve of lighting plan of the town planner. Comments 1 from the town planning dated January 31st. Final S&E bond to be determined based on final plans. We have comments from the Water and Sewer Division dated February 1st, 2019. What was the other one? The other one was the Department of Health memo dated January 11th, 2019. I think that was it, right? Wouldn't that be approval by the town engineer?
We have a motion on the application. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Simmons, voting beginning with Mr. Cohan.
Yes.
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 And yes, the application's been approved. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Which brings us to our next item of business, which is a public hearing. It's a zoning regulation amendment moratorium extension for electronic message signs. This is put forward by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Mr. Matarazzo, if you would please read the legal notice and then note all correspondence for the record, please.
Mr. Chairman, we have a legal notice 901-19, zoning regulation amendment, section 6.9.g, for the Wallingford Planning and Zoning Commission to extend the moratorium on electronic messaging signs an additional 6 months. We have interdepartmental referral regarding application 901-19 dated 1/8/19, signed by the Department of Health. And we have an application for zoning regulation change dated 1/8/19. Signed town planner, town planning and zoning department.
Thank you, Mr. Matarazzo. And Mrs. Han, this is the item being put forward by the commission. If you would please give some background.
Sure. So as you're aware, this has been extended a couple of times. The last time around, we were looking to pursue it, and then I was out for a little while, so we didn't have an opportunity to pursue the regulation. So we're looking to pursue to extend the moratorium. The moratorium is on what is called sometimes LED signs, sometimes electronic message boards, electronic signs. And that was raised when we had a few that were installed in town and raised some concern and complaints about issues like brightness. You do have a regulation on the records, on the books now, that prohibits flashing, moving, and so on and so forth, of any signs. So any signs that were installed under your current regulations prior to the moratorium are allowed to change messages, but should not be flashing, blinking, having fireworks, any of that stuff. That is somewhat of an enforcement issue, but also, again, we don't have a restriction in terms of brightness and things of that nature. So the commission decided to hold a moratorium in order to give us an opportunity to discuss further whether to and under what conditions to allow electronic signage. So, and we had started to work through some of that, but we should, our next step would be to schedule, I think, a workshop to discuss some of that a little bit further. So I think we perhaps should look to do that perhaps in March. So I have some ideas. There has been some interest expressed, particularly from members of the various sign companies that do a lot of work in Wallingford. They've offered some information and some points to consider and some potential regulation. I have some ideas, but this would give you an opportunity to discuss it a little further.
Good.
And it would be a 6-month extension.
Thank you, Mrs. Hand. Commission members with any comments? Mr. Cohen, none? No, I was looking, I wasn't quite sure if you wanted to make.
Yeah, I'm okay with extending the moratorium. I did see one or two new signs crop up, but nothing earth-shattering, so.
Someone asked me about one today that I wasn't aware of. So any that have been installed during the moratorium are violations and will need to come down.
Yeah, I can't remember where I saw this one, but it was a new one.
There is also one, there are a couple that I know of, one on Woodhouse Avenue and some on North Colony that do, I have noticed lately blinking and moving and such, and we will follow up with enforcement on those.
So they'll be notified as far as if they're in violation?
Yes.
Yeah, at this point in time, I guess to the public or people that are interested in putting signs up, I think from the commission standpoint, certainly would like to apologize for not getting this done quicker, but there were some unforeseen circumstances that did develop that didn't allow us to address this issue. But I certainly believe later on this evening, when we start discussing as far as some workshops, I suspect the commission members would be, in favor of, having a workshop concerning the signs and I would imagine it would be in March. So with that, if no other commission members have any comments, again, this is a public hearing. If there's any members of the public who would like to speak on this particular application, please come forward and name and address. Seeing none, I'd bring it back to Mrs. Hand, unless you had any further comments. Thank you. I'd entertain a motion on the application.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we close the public hearing for application 901-19.
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, and I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve application 901-19, a zoning regulation amendment section 6.9 G, for the Wallingford Planning and Zoning Commission to extend the previously approved moratorium on the issuance allowance of LED or electric signage for a third time and by an additional 6 months, such that the moratorium shall be extended to August 17, 2019, in order to allow the commission additional time to pursue appropriate regulations of such signage as proposed in the subject application, because subject to moratorium extension to be effective upon the expiration date, February 17, 2019, of the existing moratorium extension.
Thank you, Mr. Benoit. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Fitzsimmons, voting beginning with Mr. Cohan.
Yes.
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 And yes, the application's been approved. Now, Mrs. Han, if you would please take us through the remaining items on the agenda.
Certainly. Okay, item number 7 is the Meriden Markham Airport. There is an approval back from 2006 for additional tie downs and some additional hangars at the airport. Because of a change in statute during the economic slowdown in 2008 sort of time period, the state extended the the statutory time period for planning and zoning approvals. So this kind of fell within that period where it changed a couple of times, but essentially they have 9 years that applications that were approved around that time frame get 9 years that they're good for, and then they can get up to 5 years in extensions. So they still have, it was approved in 2006, so this would be their last extension, but so they do have an opportunity for one more extension, which they're requesting to use through July 10th of 2020, but that does need to be approved by the commission.
Any commission members with any questions on the request for the extension? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve application 413-16, special permit, Meriden Markham Airport, Hanover Street, Evansville Ave, Meriden, an extension through July 10th, 2020.
We have a motion for the extension. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. Voting beginning with Mr. Cohan, please.
Yes.
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 And yes.
Okay, bond releases and reductions. I did not have an opportunity to complete my full review, full inspection for both of those, and we need input from engineering, so those are not ready to go forward yet. Those will be on for next month.
Yeah, I just have a question on number 8, because, you know, when I went out there, and I realized you mentioned you didn't have an opportunity to, you know, to look at the site, but I know, you know, they have their, you know, the sedimentation and erosion control still there. But then, you know, on that bank, there's a lot of down trees, and
Yeah.
I would think before we wanted to,
Yeah,
you know, release any bond, that would be cleaned up. I mean, the building itself and the parking lot, I mean, that's all very attractive.
Right.
It's just that one area that needs some attention. It may be because of the weather that hasn't been dealt with yet.
yeah, and I know when we had that heavy rain, there was a little bit of a washout there, and I know the environmental planner was out there and had some things they needed to do for her as well, but I will look at that again.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess maybe at this point is a good time. I'm going to request that you waive Rule 5 to discuss just a potential application for 340 Washington Street, which is the building, the old senior center building that's now partially occupied by SCOW and partially occupied, or was partially occupied by the police department for storage. There's just an item about that I wanted to discuss briefly.
I guess at this point in time, I've entertained a motion to waive Rule 5 to discuss an item concerning the senior center as mentioned by our town planner.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Mrs. Hand.
Okay, so I just wanted to bring this before you. When the new senior center building was approved, and that was approved under a special permit as a recreational facility, it's in an industrial zone, and recreational facility does require a special permit. There was some sort of contemplation, but it's very vague on the record. I did some research about what the intention for the remaining building was going to be. And there was some discussion that it would be used for storage, which it partially has been. Now it is also partially occupied by SCOW, the Spanish community of Wallingford, and it has been for a number of years. And there is a proposal to use the other portion of the building, the portion that's for storage, to basically expand and renovate and have that be used for the STEM Academy, and I think also for some of the SCOW programming. Now, those two uses would both fall sort of within the educational philanthropic type uses and or under government uses, and those are both permitted uses in the zone. They do not require a special permit. So I did reach out to, when I sort of became aware of the project, I know it's been, or apparently it's been sort of in conversation for a while, and they're ready to move forward. I did talk to Mr. McCauley over at Public Works, and I talked to the acting director of SCOW and asked some questions, and I know they had some meetings with youth. She had some meetings with youth and social services to talk further today. At any rate, the primary thing that I just wanted to make sure was, or to ask them about, were potential impacts to parking. And I did look back at the old parking when the senior center was approved. There was an expansion of the parking done onto the Connecticut natural gas property, so they are currently well above the required parking for the senior center, what was contemplated for the senior center. And from what I understand, the current proposal would not really intensify what's the use by the STEM Academy or by SCOW, but would just sort of renovate it and make it more usable for them, a better space for them. I think they're very crowded in right now. They're kind of sharing programming space. They're kind of crammed in. So I think that's appropriate as an administrative approval because it is a change of use within a permitted building. Those are by right uses, not special permit uses. And I would recommend that your regulations already require that all parking has to be provided for on site. So if there was any sort of issue, or just like with any other user in town, with parking that kind of arose in the future, that would have to get addressed. There is one building coming down also, so there is an opportunity for them to create a little parking if they needed to moving forward. But I just wanted to, because it's kind of, I kind of came into it later on in the discussion, I wanted to bring that before you and see if you were comfortable with that as an administrative application. Or if you think you might be. I mean, obviously additional information would be provided as part of the application.
Commission members?
That makes sense.
I don't think that there's any objection to that from the commission. Obviously, as you said, there needs to be more information obtained on it.
Yep. Okay. All right, that's all I needed.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, item number 10 is the draft annual report. As always, I would look to you for any changes or errors that you've noticed, typos, anything like that. I did this year include information about both approved and applied for square footage because there is somewhat of a significant difference. We had some big projects that didn't end up moving, that kind of went through the process but didn't move forward. Questions, comments?
Anybody have any questions, comments? I guess just one thing, Mrs. Hand, just on, I think it is on page 3, when you talk about item number E, when you talk about the two items that didn't go through, you may want to clarify just with the Bristol Myers that that application, it wasn't denied in 2018, it was 2019. So perhaps just a clarification there,
okay.
if you would.
Okay.
Anyone else with any comments? I think with that, we are good.
Okay. So I would, I guess, look for a motion to accept
Accept
the
it.
annual report, yeah,
Sorry.
as amended.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the annual report as amended.
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Moving on.
Okay, and all 5 regular members are here, so you can have your election of officers, and it's only February.
Man, who would have thought?
I know.
All right, at this point in time, we'll move on to election of officers. At this point in time, I'd ask for any nominations for chairperson of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we nominate James Seichter to chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. Do we have any other nominations for chairperson? Seeing none, I guess I will close the nominations and ask for a vote. Beginning with Mr. Cohen.
Yes.
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 And moving on to the vice chairperson. Do we have a nomination for vice chairperson for the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Mr. Benoit as vice chair.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. Do we have any other nominations for vice chairperson? Seeing none, I'll close the nominations and ask for a vote beginning with Mr. Cohen.
Yes.
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 And yes. And finally, are there any, ask for nominations for secretary for the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to nominate Rocco Matarazzo as secretary of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. Any other nominations? Seeing none, I'll close nominations and ask for a vote for Mr. Matarazzo for secretary, beginning with Mr. Cohen.
Yes.
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 And yes. Everyone, thank you very much. Moving on, Mrs. Han.
Okay, administrative approvals, I will just leave it to you whether you had questions.
Anyone have any questions on them?
Just a survey waiver and a nail salon change of use. Okay. And, let's see, for the January meeting, everything was postponed to February, so, and that was just one application. So February, is a landscaping, okay, so this is for 4 Miles Drive. It's an undersized lot in the I-5 zone. This is an application for, or it's a variance application to potentially allow a hotel at 4 Miles Drive. It's a permitted use in the zone. It's a sort of a rear lot. It's sort of an odd lot situation. That area, the lots there were approved under a subdivision under the previous zoning regulations several years ago. So all of the lots were undersized, even more undersized. And then there were variances granted where some of the lots were merged together, previous variances for different development concepts. Under this new proposal, so that was for an office build, the old variance would have allowed an office building, and there were several variances for an office building on this property. Now they're looking to do a hotel on the property, and they are compliant. The current plan at least appears to be compliant with all of the zoning regulations, except they are looking for a variance for the front landscaping requirement. Again, they don't front on a road. Essentially, a portion of there's a sort of a cul-de-sac right-of-way that extends up off of Miles Drive. And that's sort of where they kind of have frontage, but it's not actual frontage. It's not, they don't have sort of your traditional road frontage. It's actually behind another piece of property. So the front landscaping requirements kind of don't accomplish their usual intended purpose. And they do have landscaping kind of situated in other areas on that lot to kind of make up for what's missing there. So that is the one variance that they're seeking. It is an undersized lot.
Anyone with any comments? I think we're good on that for the moment.
Okay. And then finally is your zoning enforcement log. I, as usual, will leave that to you or almost finally, there's two other things after that. I will leave that to you, questions, comments, concerns.
Anyone questions on the zoning enforcement log? I guess I had, Mrs. Hannah, I had just one. The fireplace store with all those cars there, where are we with that? And have they been cited?
I will check with the zoning enforcement officer on that. I know we've had conversations about it with the car dealer that parks their cars there, but I'll have to check to see if we've cited them yet.
Yeah, I guess if you would, because that's been going on for, some time, and I know we've had some issues with, with other car dealers. I know, we had talked about Imports Unlimited, and they were packed with cars, but they seem to have moved a lot of their cars off of that site and to be in compliance. And I know going over the years with, with Barbarino, we had some issues, and, you spoke with them, and he's now in compliance. And it just seems like this one is, it's a large parking lot with cars well, it's not a parking lot, but now it is, with cars all over it that have been there for some point in time. And I know you've spoken with them, but I think unless we, cite them and start this moving, it may very well be that way for quite some time.
Yeah.
So if you would talk to our zoning enforcement officer.
Yeah, I know she's been working quite a bit on some of the car dealerships, the other one you mentioned. So, I will follow up with that.
All right, if you please continue.
Okay, also in your packets is the registration information for the Connecticut Federation of Planning and Zoning Agencies annual conference. If you are interested in that, we will register you. We have the registration information, and there is money in the budget for that. So if you are interested in attending, please let me know. And there is also an upcoming, it's the Connecticut Land Use Law for municipal land use agencies, boards, and commissions. That is Saturday, March 23rd from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. I have attended that in the past, and it's great. So if anyone's interested in that, it's held at Wesleyan. Please let me know, and we also can register you for that if you're interested. It's.
Do you have some extra brochures on that you could perhaps just send out to, the commission members? So
Yeah, I can make copies of it.
Yeah, that'd be great if you would do that, please.
Okay. And then finally is the scheduling of workshop meetings to discuss the what we have to discuss, or the sort of most immediate things are the electronic message boards. You had also previously potentially discussed holding a workshop with the Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm not sure if you want to postpone that or if you want to pursue that at this point. And our next sort of phase in moving forward with some of the POCD recommendations is, and some of the stuff that's been happening around the train station area and the town center area. Last year, we approved the town center regs. The next step would be to look at the incentive housing zone area and and some potential TOD zoning. I think a lot of good recommendations came out of the TOD plan as well. So I think probably the first thing is the electronic signage, so we can get that.
Yeah, I would be in favor of just the first workshop, just specifically for, the electronic signs. And, then in the meantime, if you could, provide us with some, suggestions concerning the incentive housing zone, because I think we do want to look at, increasing the, as far as residential, the number of units that may be allowed, as well as then, the transit oriented district. So if you can provide us with some suggestions on that, but I think the first order of business would be the electronic signs. And does anyone have any suggestions as far as in March when we would like to do that? If we'd like to have it the week before our meeting, if we'd like to have it the week after the meeting, just how does that work into people's schedules? Mr. Benoit.
I am not here the week before,
Okay.
so.
18th works.
18th? How does the 18th work for everyone?
18th?
Well,
Okay.
if you contact Mr. Menard, see if that works for him also.
So we'll look for the 18th.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then also, Mrs. Hand, just if you would, with respect to the Plan of Conservation and Development, we do need to have another meeting of the
Yep.
Implementation Committee. And if you would contact the various members on that Implementation Committee to see what dates that may be available for them, and perhaps in March, if not very early April.
Okay,
Anything else?
that's it.
Seeing that there's no other business, I'd call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.